Sri Lanka, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, a land of stunning beaches, lush tea plantations, and ancient history. But in 2022, this idyllic image shattered. The country plunged into its worst economic crisis since independence. It was a financial earthquake that shook the nation to its core. Imagine, if you will, going to the supermarket and finding empty shelves. Your hard-earned savings evaporating overnight. The rupee, your currency, plummeting in value. This was the harsh reality for millions of Sri Lankans. Inflation soared to a staggering 80%. People struggled to afford basic necessities like food, fuel, and medicine. Long queues snaked around petrol stations, a stark symbol of the crisis. The economy was on the brink of collapse. The crisis wasn't just about numbers. It was about people. Families pushed into poverty. Children going to bed hungry. The dreams and aspirations of an entire generation hanging by a thread. It was a national emergency that demanded immediate action. How did this paradise island find itself in such dire straits? The answer, my friends, is a potent cocktail of internal blunders and external shocks. Let's break it down, shall we? For years, Sri Lanka had been living beyond its means. The government, led by the Rajapaksa family, had been on a borrowing spree. They splurged on infrastructure projects, often with questionable returns. Think of it as maxing out your credit card on a shopping spree, but with a whole nation's finances. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, a global sucker punch that sent shockwaves through tourism, a vital source of income for Sri Lanka. To make matters worse, the government implemented a disastrous ban on chemical fertilizers, crippling the agricultural sector. It was like adding insult to injury, or perhaps adding a dash of economic cyanide to their already potent cocktail. Add to this mix the global rise in fuel and food prices triggered by the war in Ukraine, and you have the perfect recipe for disaster. The Sri Lankan economy, already fragile, simply couldn't withstand the pressure. It was like trying to build a house of cards in a hurricane. Now, imagine the human cost of this economic meltdown. Imagine being a parent who can't feed their children. Imagine being a student whose dreams of a brighter future are dashed because you can't afford education. This was the reality for millions of Sri Lankans. The economic crisis wasn't just about statistics, it was about real people. Real lives turned upside down. Hospitals ran out of essential medicines. Schools struggled to stay open. The middle class, once a pillar of Sri Lankan society, found itself teetering on the edge of poverty. People took to the streets, their anger and frustration boiling over. The iconic Gota Go Home protest became a symbol of the people's desperate plea for change. They demanded accountability from their leaders, the very leaders who had driven their nation into this abyss. The social fabric of Sri Lanka, once known for its resilience and warmth, was being stretched to its breaking point. Section 4, Wickramasinghe's balancing act, IMF bailout and public anger. Enter Ranil Wickramasinghe, a seasoned politician who assumed the presidency in July 2022. Imagine stepping into a burning building, the flames of economic collapse licking at your heels. That was the unenviable task facing Wickramasinghe. His first order of business: put out the fire. He secured a $2.9 billion bailout package from the International Monetary Fund, the lender of last resort for nations in distress. Think of it as a financial lifeline, but with strings attached, those strings being austerity measures. Wickramasinghe's government hiked taxes, slashed subsidies, and froze public sector wages. These were tough but necessary measures to stabilize the economy, but they came at a cost. The already burdened masses felt the pinch of austerity, leading to widespread discontent. It was a classic catch-22. To save the economy, Wickramasinghe had to make choices that hurt the people. He was walking a tightrope, trying to balance the demands of the IMF with the needs of his people. And as we all know, walking a tightrope is a delicate dance. One misstep, and you're in freefall. Section 5. A New Hope, Disanayake's rise to power. Fast forward to 2024. The presidential election was looming, and the political landscape was shifting. Enter Anura Kumara Disanayake, the firebrand leader of the Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna, a party with a history of challenging the status quo. Disanayake was a man of the people, a charismatic orator who promised a break from the old guard. He tapped into the public's anger and frustration, their yearning for a leader who understood their struggles. His message resonated, particularly with the youth who had borne the brunt of the economic crisis. Dissanayaka's campaign was a breath of fresh air in a political landscape dominated by familiar faces and empty promises. He offered a message of hope, a vision for a Sri Lanka free from corruption and economic mismanagement. He was the David challenging the Goliath of traditional politics.